All right, so that's what psychotherapy is. Who do you go to? Like, who administers it? Luckily, the word makes sense. You go to a psychotherapist. So a psychotherapist is a licensed professional, and licensed is key here. So the different kind of titles you might go for are people who have an actual MD, a doctor of medicine. They're called psychiatrists. They can treat your disorders, and they can physically they can prescribe your medication. So if you go to the doctor's office and they write you a note for what you're prescribed, that's an MD, and that's a psychiatrist or a general practitioner doctor. You also have a clinical psychologist. So these are people with either a PhD in psychology or a PsyD. And they also can treat disorders, and some of them may be able to have a license to prescribe medication. And then there are also counselors. So this might be a variety of different master's degrees. This might take the form of guidance counselors or life counselors, marriage counselors, etc. And they don't prescribe medication, but they can help you adjust and deal with different problems you're facing. So it's pretty common for multiple individuals to work together for a single client. So maybe someone who sees a psychiatrist may also be referred to a clinical psychologist to receive more specific cognitive behavioral kind of therapy treatment. So these are the different kind of licensed professionals that you might look for. So if you're trying to figure out who you might want to see, these are some different individuals or locations you could go to at OSU. You have your OSU Health Center, which is located right across from the psychology building, fun fact, but also the counseling and consultation services that we mentioned earlier. Do your research ahead of time. So there are definitely people who are not licensed to provide this kind of input. Individuals like hypnotherapists or life coaches, religious leaders might have a master's of divinity degree and might be trained in levels of counseling, but might not have licensure to prescribe medication. It's important for you, if you have cultural values or religious values that are important to you, to find someone who also respects and fits those beliefs. So for instance, again, that example of someone who sees visions and voices from God might get told by a particular individual that they're hallucinating and schizophrenic, or they might be treated more norm for their religion if they have someone who values their beliefs. I didn't make this slide, but I want to share this story. I found this interesting. There's apparently only 2 states that actually require someone to get a license to be a hypnotherapist. So there's apparently a cat who is a professional member of the American Association of Professional Hypnotherapists. So they don't do a heck of a lot of screening for these people. This is Dr. Zoe Katz. So do your research and make sure they're real people. One thing you could do, one thing I did, is ask your general practitioner, go for a checkup, ask them for advice, find a good fit. It's also perfectly okay to shop around and to change people. You don't have to stick with the first person you find if you decide to seek out a therapist. Find someone who matches you. That's more important. So those are people you could go to. What type of therapy might you seek out? There are a couple different options. One of the most common is individual therapy, and this can come in a couple different forms. So this is just you and your therapist. It might be traditional, which is typically an hour-long meeting one-on-one, so you get a lot of one-on-one interaction, but it is typically more expensive in this case. And this can go on for as long as you need it to, typically. Or you might have brief individual therapy, which is maybe just 3 to 5 sessions, so a shorter amount of time, that focuses more on that solution building, less on solving the problems, but more just your immediate short-term ways of getting solutions. There's also group therapy. Maybe you've seen some of this depicted in things like movies like Alcoholics Anonymous types of group settings, those types of things. This is a meeting of multiple clients, and it's led by a licensed psychotherapist. Some self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous might not be supervised by a licensed psychotherapist. So this is particular here. Those people that make up the group might either be homogenous, they might all have the same diagnosis and be able to support each other in that way, or they might have all different diagnoses. So they're able to kind of interact and learn from each other in different ways. A lot of people choose group therapy because it tends to be cheaper than one-on-one therapy. And then lastly, there's kind of more specific pointed therapy where you bring in other closely related individuals. So family therapy is where you participate with your other family members, both individually and at the same time. And couples therapy is when you bring in your significant other and you focus on your intimate relationships. So there are pros and cons of doing this type of approach. It often is helpful to have both parties present to kind of talk through issues, whether it's a family dynamic or something with your relationship. It's nice to get to resolve something with both of you there. However, maybe it's not as open or honest. Maybe you're kind of inhibited in what you're willing to share in front of these other people, more so than you would be in an individual session per se. Lastly, all of these can exist online. So we've seen this now, especially in the age of COVID. You can have a teletherapy. So these can be equally as beneficial as face-to-face therapy as well. So these don't just have to be in person.